a lot of people don't know, like, how the war on drugs kind of got started. And we did a little bit of research on it. So basically, from what it seems like, it started in the Nixon era in
with that marijuana, the devil lettuce.
June 17th, 1971, we declared a war on drugs, which led into Contra, the 94 crime bill, and then where we are sort of today.
Boom, motherfucker.
We're rewinding. So play this little clip here, and we can talk about this under Mr. Nixon.
Public enemy number one
you.
In the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
Weed plant. And this is so crazy how much...
$1 trillion?
In 40 years?
Drugs are menacing our society.
There he is.
Ronald Reagan.
That goddamn actor, him.
$25 billion. State and local governments spend $25.7 billion, $6 billion on police, $5.8 billion on...
Look at all these billions.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah, we still have a bunch of homeless and poor people. All these billions on this bullshit.
Oh, there's still more to that.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot
In 2009, 1.6 million people were arrested for drug violations. More than any other offenses.
Really? Murder and everything, huh?
251,000 people are in state prisons on drug violations. 65% are black and Hispanic. Another 95,000 are in federal prison. It costs $25,000 a prisoner a year. $5.3 billion of the state and local money spent on marijuana prohibition alone.
Ain't that some dumb shit? That was 2008 data.
Yeah. So that's kind of where this whole little war on drugs started. And then we go from there, we get into the Contra piece.
Well, because that helped bring in a lot of cocaine, and that was help pretty much start, pretty much start the crack epidemic. For Reagan, when he was in office, what happened was there's two parts to it. One is they had the 7 hostages in Iran that America was supposed to be getting back. And what they did Nixon pretended, we don't negotiate with terrorists, blah, 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 but then went and negotiated with terrorists by saying, hey, want a shitload of guns?
It wasn't Nixon, it was Reagan.
I mean, Reagan, I'm sorry.
You're good?
I get the two fucks mixed up. And so they offered these people some guns. Like, hey, you'll take these guns, and I think Iran was supposed to broker the deal.
And it was also
like
$30 million.
No, that came later.
Right, but they only gave him like
they
17.
They gave them 12, and then the other 18 went to Nicaragua.
Right. I was like,
so I was like, now during this time,
money.
Yeah, let's say during this time you had the Contras, who Reagan himself were like, basically he said they were morally. I think he said morally like the founding fathers.
Well, so the idea behind the Contra was that basically communism was spreading across. So in the beginning of the 80s, we were still in the Cold War.
Yeah.
So in Nicaragua, communism was spreading down there. And for whatever reason, I guess we
were afraid that if we let that slide, that Russia would be, basically by the time we'd be Russian. We'd be talking, speaking Russian and all that. So they were afraid of that happening. So they were basically like, hey, you Contra guys who are trying to take over the government at that time in Nicaragua was Sandinita. I can't remember the name, but like I said, communists. So they were like, hey, we will fund you. We will help you. We will train. Because initially they were training the people. And then basically Congress and everybody was like, yeah, we're not going to give these people money. We're not going to train them. So how do they get their money? Hey, you guys got some pretty good coke going on around in the South America region. Can we get a taste of it? And so basically they started using drug money to pay these guys. And then they were still teaching them, but instead it just was like off the books. It was, no CIA backing, no FBI backing, none of the backing was supposedly happening, but it was still happening just under this little covert operation, the Iran Contra.
Well, and that's how part of it though was those weapons were going from Iran because we would give them to Iran because we weren't allowed to give them to Contra
exactly
because like we couldn't support it.
So it's
so
basically
we gave him to Iran and said, hey, you give him to them.
This and we'll give you the
yeah. It was like, all right, we'll give you money. You give these guns to these guys, and we'll slip you a little bit of cash.
But to help fund that, once like Congress and whatnot cut their money off,
right?
That's when the drug play, like that's when they started allowing a large influx of the cocaine to come into America, and that's where they got their money, because we all know goddamn drug business is what, a multi-billion, if not, is it billion or trillion? It's a crazy number.
Well, something that they did too was, because of the Watergate scandal, was they gave the president then more control over the CIA, because it was partially like Nixon was like, I don't know what they're doing. And they were like, oh, the CIA is getting too big. So they started being like, well, the president will put a little bit more control over the CIA. Yeah. So then Reagan was like, well, I can pull these strings if I want to.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, you know, and then they passed this like, hey.
That's the only thing he got charged with when he actually got in trouble, was a lack of oversight.
Right. So it was like.
But it was like, lack of oversight. You rascal, you need to pay attention more. And he was like, all right, cool. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing.
So I watched that documentary, Cocaine Highway with Freeway Ricky, and then I also watched Cocaine Cowboys.
Yeah.
Both were pretty good documentaries, and sort of how crack cocaine got in these neighborhoods and how they were using it to fund the war.
Yeah,
it wasn't a war we were involved in, but you know, the resistance. If
yeah,
you will.
I would say basically the war that didn't have anything to do with us, but we were worried that if it didn't go successful, that communists would take over the world.
So it was sort of weird how they knew about it, but they
didn't know.
They turned a blind eye.
Oh yeah, but they were supplying. Well, yeah. If I'm
so they weren't supplying it.
They were allowing it to happen. They were allowing it to happen.
The guy, if you watch that Freeway Ricky Ross,
yeah, I forgot his name.
He was the guy who was in charge of the cartel, basically the Contra. He was actually the one who was bringing the coke over and giving it to Ricky to sell. And then he was like, listen, I'm doing this to fund my little army back here. And the CIA wasn't like directly involved, but they're like, well, we're going to let it slide. Because
no, they were involved. They just didn't have their stamp on it like they normally would if they had a real operation going on.
So from what I and this is where I know we'll see different is the point I guess I'm getting to, the debate part.
Okay.
And it sort of frustrated me slightly when I watched the Freeway Ricky movie.
Okay.
Because he made it seem like he was somehow a victim in that movie. You know, it was like,
did they actually have him in there?
Well, he was like, well, you know,
no, I'm saying the real guy. They had him.
Yeah, he was the whole thing. They followed him around, and don't get me wrong, he seemed like a good dude, and he learned from his mistakes. But he lived a clean life for a while, and then they straight up set him up. And he fell for the bait.
Yeah, it's just like in Blow. You remember in Blow?
Yeah,
in the last
it's exactly what it was.
He was like, I need some money. I ain't got no money. He's like, I'll introduce you to this guy.
Yeah,
and they were like, oh nope, come on back.
Boop, boop.
Got your ass.
And it was like, it's sort of frustrating because he sort of made himself seem like a victim, and I'm like, dude, you were the guy still pumping the crack into the neighborhoods. Like, yes, I get the CIA was like, oh, the fund of money, this and that and the other, and like they knew about it, but they weren't stopping it. Like they also like weren't not stopping it. They just let it happen.
Yeah, they knew they could stop it though.
So what they could have stopped it, but my point was like they didn't stop local law enforcement. And they also didn't.
Oh, no.
They didn't tip them off. They were just like, "Oh, this is working over here, and this guy's funding the Contra.
Yeah,
we're gonna just."
It's basically like, I ain't see shit. You see that shit? I ain't see that shit.
And I saw that movie Kill a Messenger, which is about the reporter
who broke the story.
Broke the story, and then they all tried to make him look bad, etc., etc. And then he wound up with 2 bullet holes in the head.
And suicide, baby. Do you know?
Yeah, of course.
Epstein hung himself.
But, it was just I guess I always had the impression that the CIA was legit like putting the coke on the street. And from what I got from the documentary, they didn't do that at all. They just knew about it and let it roll.
I would say that's kind of putting it on shit, because it's like all right, put it this way. I don't know, like if I know you're doing something illegal, right? Now I'm supposed to be one of the people who stops you. But if I know you're doing something legal and I know, but it's also by you doing that, it's helping, through a second, third party, this person over here that I want to get helped.
Right.
It's like, and I go, Steve's over there. He's fucking some shit up over there. But, my friend over here, man, he's doing real good off of what Steve's doing. And we were going to do it, but then it got cut short. So how about we just not stop Steve and we let that shit fly? It's like, it's still my fault if the shit happens because I'm supposed to go in there and stop it, especially knowing about it. Like, they knew. I mean, he's not a victim as in the sense of, like, he was a drug dealer. He knew he was a drug dealer.
Right.
He was selling drugs.
Right.
And, I mean, yeah, it came in cocaine and then got turned into crack, but it's still like you weren't helping. Like, you know what I'm saying? There was still people who were strung out on coke, just like there's people who were strung out on crack. It's just crack hit harder than coke. Coke was easier to kick than a crack addiction. But that's what I'm saying. But they still are to blame because it's like they knew.
Yeah, but it's kind of like at the same time, it's like it's I can't even make a good analogy for it.
Well, because it's
like the documentary was like this was going on, and he's like, well, if blah blah blah, and if they would have, he basically made it seem like if they would have stopped him, but he still kind of owned up to the mistake, and like yes, he fed into it, but he just sort of played like
he tried to play victim
a little bit, and I'm like, dude.
Now
you were selling it into the streets.
I think it's the second go around when they got him. I was like, damn, that was a bad setup because his connect set him up.
Yeah.
Like his connect was the one who kind of pressured him into it.
Right.
And then was like, it was what do they call it? When prostitutes are like, you gotta let me know you're a cop.
Entrapment.
Like, yeah, trap. There you go. It was like, so it was kind of like that because it was like, he was like, nah, man, I'm not messing with that no more. And then the guy was like, well, man, you can get 100,000 or I forgot how much money it was. He was like, but just introduce me to this guy. He's like, fuck, all I'm doing is introducing. I'm not actually touching nothing. I'm not doing that.
He did eventually. Yeah.
Was it the second? No, at the second time around, that's where he just got caught up. So he went to jail 3 times.
I think it was 3 times. It was like the second they like handed off the money, and then like
I'm talking about the last one where he got life, and then that's where he came back out. Is that what?
He was in the car or in the truck, I think, and they switched a bag and money, and like.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, and then it was like the second he had it in his possession, because in the documentary
they swarmed him. Right?
They they just hit him on the streets, and pull him over.
But I mean, yeah, at the same time, yeah, he's not a victim. Now, he was a pawn for sure.
Oh yeah,
he wasn't a victim, but he was definitely a pawn.
Again, they just let it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, they knew about it. It was like, nah, it's benefiting us, so fuck it. But that's where I have an issue because it's like none of the people who were in charge got in trouble, really. Like Oliver North got probation. Probation.
We had like 3 years of
probation.
No, I thought it was like a sentence or something, and then it just got like
he never
reduced or something. I thought it was the snip I was watching before.
He never spent a night in jail. He got it was something plus probation, and probation was
it like house arrest or something?
I don't even think he got that. It was like
I have to look that up.
I think he may have gotten a slight trouble like with his regular job. I think he might have had to retire or some shit like that.
He was sentenced by U.S. District Judge Gerard Giesel.
We got to pay a fine or something?
On July 5th, 1989, for a 3-year suspended prison term, 2-year probation, $150,000 in fines, and 1,200 hours of community service. North performed some of the community service with Potomac Gardens, a public housing project in southeast Washington, D.C. So,
and that was one of the hardest hit places.
3-year suspended prison term, which I don't think he actually ever served.
He never saw a day in prison. That's what I'm saying. So that's what I'm like. It was literally a slap on the wrist.
I guess you do get, some people do get a suspended prison term. It's like, hey, you got to, it's not like, I have seen that before where people like don't get arrested on the spot. They're like, oh, a month and a half from now, you got to show up to jail.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right.
And it's like, but that's if they don't think you're a flight risk, all that shit.
Right.
But you usually have to have a lawyer, some money in your pocket, because that's not just something they just offer up to, people. But come on, he's too big to fail.
Right.
Type shit. Like, you're not going to put him in, just like it was, like I said, instead of Reagan getting in trouble, he got that he just had a lack of oversight. He's like, oh man, it just got out of control, and I didn't really pay attention to it. But everybody corroborated his story because it's like, yeah, we're not going to go against the president. He's a sitting president. Same thing with jail. Like nobody wants to put a sitting president in prison because it really will destroy the country.
Yeah,
it's like the way we have it all set up is like our sitting presidents in jail, because then whatever party that is, Democrats or Republican, that party's done for. And then on top of that, the stock market's going to crash and people are not going to do business with us and blah, blah, blah. Like, so I don't understand, and then I do understand why nothing ever happened to Reagan. And he was just able to serve his term out. But I don't understand why, like, Oliver North, nothing happened. I mean, I wish I could do that much damage and just get fucking a suspended sentence and then still go on to, like, write books and be contributors to these news platforms and make millions and hundreds of thousands of dollars and never be broke, never be poor, never really be discredited like he should have been. And then they flipped it on the guy who broke the story and killed him.
Yes.
And that's what happened to him. He ended up broke and being discredited, and then just so happened to off himself with 2 bullets to the head. I've never seen somebody shoot himself one and be like, you know what? I missed that first go around. Let me try this shit again.
I want to find the cartel guy's name.
It was like Padone, something Doan or something like that.
There he is. This is the dude. That's actually his face. This guy right here. So, a supporter of the Nicaraguan Contras, Oscar.
What was it? Oscar? You said Cornejo?
Danilio, blah, blah, sold tons of cocaine in the United
Danilio,
States.
that's what it was.
Okay,
Yeah,
Oscar Danilio.
That's what what's the name kept saying in his interviews. He's like, Danilio would hit me with this work. He said he used to supply him every day.
Yeah, Oscar Danilio.
Like I said, you had these young people and you had a lot of violent people because...
Well, it pretty much deteriorated I don't say deteriorated
area,
but
it destroyed a lot of communities because now you have a brand new, like, people already knew about cocaine and like heroin, stuff like that, and like, I don't really mess with it. They didn't know about crack. Right. People didn't know how addictive it could be, how much money could be made with it.
I mean, cocaine still is
cocaine's still
addictive,
around. Yeah,
I mean?
Crack is still around. I mean, but to be a new crackhead, that's you got to not be paying attention to anything.
Really bad. What really made me mad about that movie, Freeway Ricky Ross, and the idea of, and this was sort of like kind of what made me upset, was how he was so bought up in his name. Like, he, to this day, you could tell he's like proud of what, like, I guess his idolized.
It's a weird.
He's like, he made all this money on using my name and this, that, and the other, and all things I did, and like. Dude,
you're talking about the rapper. Yeah, you're talking about the rapper versus the real guy.
You didn't do something notable to be like, well, I learned from my experiences. But like, so why? Like, I get it. You're mad about it, but
it's like,
it's not like a legacy that he stole from you.
And it's not. It's a good
real
one
bad
anyway.
thing. Yeah, like you destroyed.
It's a weird thing because it's like
a community. You destroyed it.
Community, try communities all across the country.
He bounced around a lot too.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. That's why his name was Freeway. He wasn't just California. He
got the name Freeway because he was right off the freeway.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He did. I think he did work in Chicago, and I mean, his shit spread throughout the country. It wasn't just like he was that guy. Even though he was getting it from somebody else, he was looked at as the supplier, as like.
He was the man.
Yeah, he was like, he'll tell you something. He was like, I never stood in the corner. I didn't do this shit. He was like, I only fucking, like, here you go. Here's this and here's some money.
Yeah, push it out. But the point was, they talked about, like, was it Warren G and all these other guys, and how that sort of started that drug dealer mentality of, like, they saw and idolized Ricky Ross. And we're like, we want to be like him. And then,
but that's like that was in every, especially like say in the 80s and the 90s when crack was like bigger. Because I remember being in like Houston and seeing some of the drug dealers, like even the low level drug dealers, it's like motherfucker had a couple $1,000s a day.
Yeah.
They had these in Houston. We like Cadillacs, like old model Cadillacs. And
Yeah.
call them slabs or whatnot.
Cadillac Coupe de Ville.
It's like, but they had Cadillacs and they had the rims, they had everything done. I mean, they had the trunk done, the candy paint, all this, and they just buy. And then you just have people who buy, expensive cars, Mercedes, Jaguar, shit like that. Put rims on them, sound system, all that. And I remember seeing that as a kid, like, man. But I also knew, like,
they didn't get it a good way.
No, I knew they didn't get away. I was like, I don't want to do that. I was like, because it seems scary. The one, it just seems scary because crackheads seems, as a kid, they seem scary. You're like, why are you acting like this? Like, you're an adult. Why are you behaving weirdly? But from all that, I was like, it really pushed America into this weird thing because like just like with cocaine in the 80s, or is it like the late 70s and 80s, where Miami was the murder capital of the country.
I was like,
for a good little while.
I can't remember how many said, like, killings a day.
Oh, it was crazy.
Oh,
it was like, you know how you guys bring up Chicago all the time?
Oh, yeah.
Miami was killing those numbers.
Literally.
No pun intended. You know what I'm saying? But it was like, but Miami was that, and we're talking broad daylight. We're talking all times of day, and then on top of everything, that's what happened. Like with this money came these new guns that not even the police could get. It's like which came into where you're talking about the '94 crime bill.
well, so that's kind of we got to lead up to that a little bit more.
That's
though,
what I'm saying.
because,
That's what
like,
led up into
what
that.
happened
The
was
violence.
that violence of all this
Money, all this new fame, stuff like that. It literally took.
But see, that's sort of the thing about the self-destructiveness of the idea of being a drug dealer, or like the rappers rapping about it and idolizing, and it sort of created a pop culture behind.
Oh no, this is before that.
No, but it led into.
I mean, in the '90s, like more in the '90s, it started happening.
Contra was in the '80s, right? So like the war on drugs was sort of declared just on pot, and then
initially,
you hit up Contra, and then the crack era come, and then from there, you had the Freeway Ricky into the '80s, and then all of a sudden then you get this like glamorized. Plus, you already had like policing issues then too, but then it just got ramped up with all the crime. Yeah. I would say crime, violence.
Yeah,
the violence and all the killings and this, that, and the other, and even down in Florida, it was a lot of like.
Oh no, that was crazy.
Colombians. It didn't have anything to do.
And, Cubans and
and they hated each other, and then on top of that,
they were killing crazy, and they were doing like the cartel.
So then
shit,
it just pushed the war on drugs even harder.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was to the point to be
well, it actually became
Contra.
a war. It actually became a war. Initially, it was just something to say to like stop weed smokers and maybe some dudes doing LSD. It was like, which was like, oh man, you're bullshitting. But then it was like, nope, here's some new shit. Boom. Now we got too much crime going on. Now we got too much violence going on. Now we got, families and people being murdered.
Well, when we were kids, I remember cartoons. It was like, "Don't do drugs." Commercials, "Don't do drugs." Drug commercials. Drug commercials. Like,
was it Dare Dog McGruff? Take a bite out of crime.
Scruff McGruff.
Yeah. It was like, and then you had the Dare program.
Yeah, that's Mothers Against Drug Driving. Mothers Against Drug Driving is
that's
Dare.
MAD.
Yeah, but isn't? Oh, you're right.
Dare was the drug one that Nancy Reagan pushed. That was her thing as first lady.
Drug abuse resistance education.
I remember they came to my school.
Oh yeah. Anyway, point I was getting at was just the way that sort of idea of how gangster rap and like Warren G in that era and like sort of
you should say Snoop because he was a way bigger
Snoop,
rapper.
But you know what I mean. Warren G was just a guy that came from. He actually worked for Freeway Ricky. At one point,
corner boy,
right?
Shit like that,
yeah, it wasn't like major, but the point he also rapped about it a lot. But
and Snoop was the bigger star, and he went to jail for selling drugs.
I'm just saying how I guess it was sort of put on a pedestal.
Well, because and that's what I was telling you. It's like, so you already have poor communities, you already have people doing bad.
And I get it. It's an easy buck.
No, I'm saying not even that. It's like, okay, if you see. Like if the doctors and the lawyers were coming around in fancy cars and like showing the kids off and hanging with the kids and shit like that, then yeah, but that's not the problem. Like people were moving out of these areas, and they're like, "Ooh, I'm glad I got out of there. I ain't never going back."
Right.
But you had the drug dealers who were like, "Hey," and it's funny. It's a weird thing because you would have a fucking notorious drug dealer. He could be a killer. He could be all this. He could be a one beat, but he'll come around and he'll
help
and he'll get kids money. He'll buy people shit. He'll go to the ice cream man. Hey, everybody, what y'all want? Take out $100 bill. Give them everything. I want to buy the truck. You know, stuff like that. And it's like, then you see them with the cool cars. You see them with the pretty girls. You see them living this life. Now, what you don't realize is that shit is extremely short-lived. And if they don't die, they go to prison. And when they go to prison for 3 to 4, 5 times the amount of time they ever spent on the streets making drugs. They might have had 2 good years or 3 good years, something like that.
Well, and that's kind of how you got the thing where I think it's sort of my knowledge of it started was sort of with like the Wire stuff down in Baltimore, where it was like, well, let the kid do it. Because if the kids do it, I don't.
It's juvenile,
right?
Juvie. Yeah,
he's not getting the time, and that was sort of the way around the
that
3-strike law.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
It was like, all right, well, and that's where we saw like, I mean, you always had it, but it was more prominent in those times because it was like, I got this 12-year-old. Well, shit. He's not 18 or 19, so I can't send him to prison. I send him to juvie for 4 months. I send him to juvie for 3 months. Or he might get a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
But that helps with the parts of the crime bill, which build the prison to, school to prison pipeline.